Hello. Well, good evening, everyone. This is really more of a chat than a speech per se. However, throughout this, I will mention a number of dances, and I'd like you to tell us how many dances I mention in the course of the evening. Many of you will have danced at school. And in Scotland, physical education students were required to take the first part of our teaching certificate until relatively recently. And it's unfortunate that that's no longer the case. And that's why I think that quite a number of you will have danced at school. 2 women are credited with the foundation of the RSCDS, Mrs. Isabel Stewart and Miss Jean Milligan. Many of you will know this, of course. Mrs. Stewart was born Isabel Campbell, and she lived on her father's estate in Argyll. Her links with the area were very strong, and after she was married, although she lived in Ayr, she was the county commissioner for the Girl Guide movement in Argyll. She discovered, to her surprise, that the guides in Argyll were dancing English country dances for their country dance badge. And when she queried why they were not dancing Scottish country dances, she was told that there was a book of English country dances and there wasn't one of Scottish country dances. And so she set about creating a book. She selected some dances, got her friends to check that she'd got them right, and then she went to Edinburgh to Patterson's, the publishers, and she spoke with one Michael Dyack. He then asked her if she had discussed it with Jean Milligan, who was very much involved with the Beltane Society. It had its origins in Gaelic, and every year they held a festival in May, where dancing was involved. Jean Milligan, a member of the Beltane Society, as I have said, was quite enthusiastic. And as a result, the society came into being. Mrs. Stewart organised a meeting in Glasgow on the 27th of November, the 26th of November, 1923, and invited various people. She asked Lord James Stuart Murray to chair the meeting, but unfortunately, he was unable to do that. And so it was a Mr. F.H. Bissett who actually chaired the meeting. 27 people attended, and there were 23 people who offered their apologies. Many of these folks were members of the Girl Guide Association. And so all of this really was so that the guides could do Scottish country dances for their country dancer badge. Book 1 has quite a number of dances that you will recognise. The Duke of Perth, the Circassian Circle, Strip the Willow, the Cumberland Reel, and Book 1, number 1, is the Petronella. Many of you will have done those dances at school, I'm sure, and if not, in a class more recently. Excuse me. It's water, by the way. Right. Mrs. Stewart, as I said, was brought up in Argyll, and the family home was Inverneil House, the name of a dance, and that's very popular in the Aberdeen area. There's a number of dances celebrating Mrs. Stewart's involvement. There's Mrs. Stewart's Jig, Mrs. Stewart of Fasnacloich. Fasnacloich was the estate where her husband was brought up. And Isabel Stewart of Fishhook, which was devised recently by Melvyn Short. He couldn't call it Mrs. Stewart of Fishhook because that dance had been devised by Andrew Hodgson, one of our members from Cape Town. Mrs. Stewart moved to South Africa a few years after her husband died, and also because of her health. She had relatives there too. She still took a very active interest in the society. And every year before the AGM, she was in touch with RSCDS headquarters, and lots of other times too. Miss Milligan is regarded, and Fiona showed you a photograph, but there she is, Mrs. Stewart. Miss Milligan is regarded as the co-founder, and she definitely went on to spread the news about Scottish country dancing, not just in the rest of Scotland or even the rest of the United Kingdom, but worldwide, as well as hosting a summer school at St Andrews until she died in 1978. And the summer school had been founded by Miss Milligan and Mrs. Stewart, in 1927. Mrs. Stewart went to St Leonard's School for Girls in St Andrews, so there was already a link with St Andrews for her. Miss Milligan's Strathspey is another dance, but although there are several dances which mention Miss Milligan, that's the only one published in RSCDS book. Miss Milligan was intent on reviving old Scottish country dances. And as a result, these were published. 101 Scottish country dances, and 99 more, known as Miss Milligan's Miscellanies. Now, her interpretation of some of these old dances is questionable, but we must remember that we have access to sources these days that she certainly didn't have in the 1940s and 50s. Miss Milligan was honoured by the University of Aberdeen with a doctorate. And I understand this was the dress that she wore on that occasion. That portrait actually hangs in the boardroom at Coates Crescent. There's another link with Aberdeen. Mrs. Stewart was secretary and treasurer from the onset of the society until well into the 1930s, when Winifred Forgan was employed as an assistant secretary, at first on a part-time basis. Now, Winifred Forgan was actually brought up in Aberdeen because her father was minister of Gilcomston St. Coombs. So there we have it, folks, Aberdeen again. Well, the Scottish Country Dance Society grew from its early beginnings and branches began to spring up. Aberdeen being instituted in 1925. Mrs. Stewart came to the meeting and she invited Bishop Dean to chair the meeting. The heading in the Press and Journal, the local newspaper from the northeast of Scotland, on the 17th of October, read, "Scottish Country Dancing Revival, Bishop Dean and the Oldest of the Arts." What followed was a description of the inaugural meeting of the Aberdeen branch in 1925. 50 people attended, with Bishop Dean presiding, and Mrs. Stewart explaining what the Scottish Country Dance Society was all about. And the audience were very enthusiastic. Lord Glentanner became the first president of the Aberdeen branch, and other notable Northeast people became members. Lord and Lady Aberdeen, known in the Northeast as Wee Twa, or in Canada, of course, as an ex-Governor General. And other people, Charles Murray, for instance, the writer of Hame With. In December of that year, in December 1925, Miss Milligan assessed 14 candidates for their teaching certificate. And by the end of the year, we had 99 members and 2 classes, each of an hour. The minutes of the early committee meetings recorded problems with accommodation for classes. So what's new, folks? In 1928, an advanced class was instituted, and by 1930, 4 classes took place during the week, and they were extended to 2 hours each. The cost of a class was 1 shilling per member and 1 6p if you weren't a member. Now, that was actually quite an inconsequential sum. It wasn't an inconsequential sum, it was quite a lot of money in 1930. The branch continued to flourish, and in 1937, the annual general meeting came to Aberdeen, and it has continued to do so over a number of years on occasions since. From 1939 to 1943, not surprisingly, there were no classes. But in 1942, in preparation for classes resuming again, there was another candidates class. The first mention of classes for young people is in 1946. And by 1952, we had 4 branch children's classes. Scottish education would have been taught in the PE departments in all the schools around. And some children obviously wanted to continue their hobby. Aberdeen branch, classes for adults and children. Well, still to this day, though not at the moment, we have general and with technique on a Monday, very advanced on a Tuesday, beginners on a Wednesday, and also a general class. On Thursday afternoon, we have beginners and improvers, and later that afternoon, a general class. And that's not to mention a Cayley class, which has been exceedingly popular. Sadly, we're down to 3 classes for children, and the most successful of these is Craigie Buckler, or as was previously known, Airy Hall. Children have so many other pursuits these days, it's not surprising that we have fewer classes, and it's not taught in schools anymore. All this may be slightly different this coming year, but we're keeping our fingers crossed that we will be able to have our normal enjoyment of dance. Lots of Northeast people have been involved in Scottish country dance and the society. Isabel Cram, Leslie Martin, Jean Yates, John Drury, Bobby Watson. Now, Bobby was one of Miss Milligan's boys. Musicians, Nan Main and Kath Coops, and nowadays, Kathleen Anderson and Frank Thompson also teach at summer school. Jim Stott was a very successful summer school director, and lots of Northeast people have taught and played at summer school, including summer school and winter school, actually, including Angela Young. And Angela has done us proud over the last year and a bit. She's about to take over as convener of membership services, but she really has thought very carefully and produced marvelous stuff for our membership over the last period, with teachers from right across the world and a similar audience. Others, perhaps less well known internationally, have also helped the branch to flourish, and many still offer their talents. I was chairman of the branch from 1998 to 2000, and that was when we had our 75th anniversary, and we were privileged to be welcomed to a reception in the townhouse. So here's hoping for 2025, and I hope I'm still around to come too. I was chairman of the RSCDS from 2002 to 2004. And it's a very busy time for anyone who takes on that office. It's a very rewarding role, and I don't mean in the financial sense, quite the reverse, in fact. But to see so many people enjoying our favorite pastime is absolutely great. Now, the aims of the society, told to us by Mrs. Stewart that October night in 1925. They have changed the wording slightly, but basically they are the same. to preserve and further the practice of traditional Scottish country dances, to provide and assist in providing education or instruction on the practice of Scottish country dancing, to promote, publish by all available means information and music relating to Scottish country dancing with descriptions of Scottish country dances, music and diagrams in simple format and at a moderate price, to collect books, manuscripts, illustrations and other memorabilia relating to Scottish country dance and the society. Generally, to do such other things as may be considered by the society to be incidental or conducive to the attainment of the objects stated in any of them. And the history. In 1947, the Queen, then the Princess Elizabeth, became our patron, and she has remained so ever since. In 1951, the King, George VI, had granted the Society royal status, and so we became the RSCDS. Our worldwide offices were purchased in 1955, and they are just along the street from the Girl Guide headquarters. So you see, we're never that far apart. There's a couple of dances relating to the offices as well. There's 12 Coates Crescent as Strathspey and EH37AF, probably more commonly known as the postcode dance, because the actual code is sometimes difficult to remember. We have teaching certificates, medal tests, dancing proficiency awards, and so on. Or dancing efficiency award, they're called these days, sorry. The RSCDS and its branches, ours included, organise weekend schools, day schools, week-long events, and of course, there's the RSCDS Summer School in St Andrews, which normally runs for 4 weeks. And TAC, that's Teachers Association of Canada School, which runs for a week. And a week-long winter school in Pitlochry, also run by the Society. The Society grew. Probably the largest membership was in the 60s and 70s. However, we are a worldwide organization with lots of branches overseas, particularly in areas where Scots have settled. These days, there's a lot of young dancers in Europe, and there's a new branch there's a new branch in Brittany, and 2 of the growth areas are Russia and Japan. The Japanese are particularly enthusiastic. Their dancing tends to be a little bit balletic, but it is very accurate. In fact, I tutored a class for their teaching certificate in Japan, and one of the men had 4 hilts. Another of the candidates spoke in English. And at the actual exam, there's always an interpreter provided for the examiners, who on that occasion were Elma McCausland, Elma Donald from Aberdeen, and Morag Napier from Australia. Well, this chap, who spoke extremely good English because he had worked abroad, taught the class in English. So the actual interpreter was needed to tell the class what to do, not the examiners what was happening. On another occasion, I was in Lyon examining with the same Elma McCausland. And the day before, their tutor told us that one of the class in particular was very anxious about speaking English. Well, in my schoolgirl French, I said, and I won't bore you with the French, I said that I didn't know whether he was going to be teaching in the afternoon or the following day. I said, this afternoon or tomorrow, it is possible for you to speak French from time to time, but please speak slowly. In other words, so that Elma and I could understand what was being said. What I have to tell you is that he didn't speak one word of French. He spoke English all the time. Now, the organization of the society. It has been a charity since the 1990s. And until 2002, we had an executive council. And each branch had a representative at the council. Obviously, the people from the UK more or less usually came. And from overseas, they appointed someone to represent them. This, of course, meant that the meetings were very large and unwieldy, and discussions sometimes went on for a very long time and weren't always as conclusive as you would have wished. It was decided that we would change the system and we would have an elected management board. And that came into play in 2002. Branches are actually autonomous as far as they are, but they are licensed to the society. So you can do what you please, but it's got to be according to the license. Very recently, we became a company limited by guarantee, and that resulted in relatively minor changes. We currently have a management board where there is a chairman-elect, the conveners of 3 committees, and 8 other members. The committees are education and training, membership services, and youth services. And in addition to that, there's a group called FIGAG to advise on financial matters. Now, education and training has a convener, and in the final year of his or her office, a convener-elect and 8 other members, plus the school's director. Membership services has a similar arrangement, convener-elect, and they have, now wait till I get it right, they have 5 members, and the music director is a member of that committee. And finally, we have youth services, again a similar arrangement, and this time they have 4 members. Well, whatever else may feature, it's dancing that is our common interest, and which I hope we will be able to continue as soon as possible. So, being a contact sport has not worked terribly well for us, but here's to us returning to dancing. Thank you, folks.
If anybody has any questions, can you please make us aware in the chat box? Once these photographs are finished, I will be putting on your cameras and letting you unmute your mics so that you can ask your questions Also, Jean will need to know how many dances you got in our little chat.